concept of employee ownership resonates, I think, with a lot of small business owners because your business is a sum of the employees. It's what makes you go to work every day. It's what you love, and you'd love to be able to do that. But I didn't really understand how that would be a financially feasible thing, I think, early on. It was something I learned over time.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Tricia Salcido, the CFO over at Softstar Shoes. Tricia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pat. I'm glad to be here.
So, Tricia, what is Softstar and how did you get started?
Well, Softstar is a really great little company based in Philomath, Oregon. And we have about 30 team members and we craft shoes. That's what we do is we're shoemakers. We are primarily an e-commerce business in terms of how we distribute our shoes. Although we do have a workshop there in Oregon where you can also come visit in person and see what we do. And we've been in business for about 40 years. So Softstar started 40 years ago as a baby shoe company in Texas, making kind of like the little moccasin type footwear for babies, and has grown over the years into becoming a minimal footwear company where we make all kinds of shoes and slippers for adults is our primary audience. So anything from a running shoe to a winter boot to a sandal, we have solutions for people who want shoes that are handcrafted, made in the USA but mostly shoes that are very natural in design or minimal in design that feel comfortable and that you're like barefoot in. That kind of came from our roots as making shoes for babies, where it was intuitive to me, at least at the time with a young toddler, that you didn't want to have your kid in a stiff shoe. As we grew the business and I started listening to customers, I realized there were a lot of athletes and people who were concerned about their health and their running or walking and wanted to have stronger feet. And that's how we kind of found our way growing into the minimal footwear market. So our shoes are designed to be like barefoot. You can roll them up in your hands. You can flex your toes. There's not a lot of structural support or foam. It's really designed to help you operate on a day-to-day basis as if you were barefoot, but with the protection and hopefully the style that you want.
That's amazing. And how did you get started with the business?
So I had been interested, I think, most of my young adult life in having my own business because I come from a family of business owners, and it was just kind of what you did. And I felt like, well, I should figure that out. But I had a background in engineering, mechanics, and have an MBA. And so I worked in corporate for a long time, and I was working at an engineering company in Oregon when my husband and I started our family. And he was great. He just said, maybe it's a good transition to have your own business right now. You might have more flexibility with your schedule. And of course, I had this great dream that I'd have my kids with me at work 24/7 and it would be wonderful. So I started looking into buying an existing business. I didn't have a brilliant idea at the time of something I wanted to do. My skills were very much more corporate based, and I didn't want to do a service business. I love manufacturing. I like making product. So I started looking at companies. And while I was in the process of doing that, looking at biz buy sell and meeting with different business owners, I kind of stumbled across Softstar. It was a cute little workshop in our hometown. And I was out walking and walked into the shop, and it was beautiful. It smelled like leather, and there were all these cute baby shoes everywhere. And I said, oh, this is it. I knew it. That's what I wanted to do. So just kind of jumped in at that point, asked the owner who was there if he'd ever considered selling. And luckily he was. And he still stayed with me. He stayed with me for 20 years. He just recently retired last summer. But yeah, we've built it from a baby shoe company into the company it is today. We went from 80,000 in annual sales to 3 million in annual sales in that time, and really learned a lot from our customers about what they need and what they wanted in footwear.
That's incredible. And I think cherry on top, I mean, we've been planning this podcast for what, 4 months, 6 months, I think it was that 6 months ago, maybe, that you and I started talking, and we decided, hey, let's put it off because there was a really exciting company announcement that you had been working on that was finalized just 2 weeks ago. So tell us a little more. What's changing?
Yeah, well, yes, it's really exciting. Softstar, as of this year, is now 100% employee owned. And that was a huge transition for me and for the company. And we're really proud and excited. In fact, we're actually even running a picture of us all on our website right now. We're all in front of the company with our signs saying we're employee owned. We've been gearing up for it for a year and a half now. So very excited about that. The next era.
That's amazing. So I think the thing I'm really excited to pick your brain on in particular is talking about just broadly that ownership transition. So first, can we start out? I know you mentioned it's employee owned through an employee owned trust. Can you give us more context? What is an employee owned trust? Certainly you're not a lawyer, but at a very high level, how does an employee owned trust operate?
Yeah, no, it's actually not even something I'd ever heard of before a couple years ago. There's an employee-owned trust is a relatively new form of employee ownership in the United States, but it's been around for hundreds of years in the UK. So it's a very common form of employee ownership in the United Kingdom. And there's only a few states actually in the United States where you can have an employee-owned trust. So if you live in Oregon, or I think the other one's, I think it's Maryland. You're lucky you can do it in your home state, but otherwise, if you're like in Wisconsin, you need to do it through those states. And basically, a trust is a legal entity. It's like a person, and it 100% owns all the shares of the company, and it has a mission that can be unique to whatever that trust needs to be set up. In our case, the mission of our trust is to build local community, to keep our manufacturing and our employees in good jobs, well-paying jobs, to share the profits with the employees, make beautiful product and healthy product that contributes to the well-being of our customers. So those things are kind of baked into this legal document. And so employee trusts have this kind of unique feature in that if you have that model of employee ownership, could be, I mean, theoretically for infinite in terms of time. It could go on forever. So it's not like someone could come in and buy it. It's perpetual. It's set. Like, this is the mission of this company and it can't change. So that's what's kind of unique about employee trust. There are other forms of employee ownership that people are more probably familiar with. One is the ESOP, the employee stock ownership plans. You tend to need to be a bigger company with really big margins in order to successfully pull off an ESOP. So you generally see those in industries that maybe have 100 or more employees. And then the other form that was presented as an option to us is called an employee co-op. These are different than like the cooperatives you think of, like natural food co-ops or things like that. It's not like that. It's an employee ownership model where employees can choose to opt in, and then they have to buy their own shares and they have to buy in. So they all have their pros and cons. For us, a trust was a really unique and cool way to kind of preserve our mission. And as well, it's not as scary for your team. Everyone just belongs to the employee-owned company, and it's not like you have to worry about buying in or your shares, or it's not as complex of a financial setup as the other two models. It's very complex to set up, but once it's set up, it's a lot more simple.
That's amazing. And I mean, the sense I get hearing that, it sounds like from a pretty early stage, you had decided that your transition plan was going to be put this company in the hands of the employees that are there. How did you know? Okay, tell me more.
No, I mean, when you own a business, one of the things they'll tell you early on is, you want to start thinking about your transition plans maybe 10 years in advance of when you actually plan to exit the business. Honestly, starting 10 years ago, I had this big dream that I was going to sell Softstar as a footwear company to a bigger footwear company and be acquired, or maybe be acquired by them. and retire fabulously, flush with cash and all this. And that's a fine aspiration. It didn't really pan out that way. But I was always, looking at things that way, like how do we grow the company into something that would be desirable to be acquired? And really that's where I spent a lot of my time early on in the business. I also worked with merger and acquisition type people who would help us, get our business information out there. And I actually had offers that way, which were interesting, but they weren't super compelling. Looking back, they were probably very strong offers, but I didn't maybe understand that at the time. And while this was kind of happening in parallel with that, other things kind of came together that helped me realize that I really wanted to go the employee-owned route. One was I heard a great speech by a company called Project Equity, which their mission is to help grow employee ownership in the United States. And so, of course, they're educating business owners about it as an option. They did a great job. And I never really thought it would be something that would be financially feasible, but they really got my interest piqued. So that happened. Of course, the concept of employee ownership resonates, I think, with a lot of small business owners because your business is a sum of the employees. It's what makes you go to work every day. It's what you love, and you'd love to be able to do that, but I didn't really understand how that would be a financially feasible thing, I think, early on. It was something I learned over time. And then in addition, my father, who had run their family business for 50 years, had recently sold his business, and he had a very successful exit financially. And I was so happy for him. But what I realized is that he really was struggling after the sale in watching this company that he built and the employees who he had invested so much in kind of go downhill. Obviously, anyone who buys your business isn't going to do it the same way you do, but it's sad when the people who come in after maybe don't care for it as much and or the community as much and or their employees in the same way. It was a hugely emotional process for him to go through that and see that, to the point where he didn't even want to go into his old business. It just depressed him. And so I started looking and talking with other members in our family who had businesses and their experiences, and realized that's a pretty common feeling that a lot of exiting owners have. It will eventually pass. It will take a couple years to get through that and by that. That made an impression on me as well. Like, why does it have to necessarily be the direction I go? Right. And learning more about employee ownership as a financially responsible way to actually exit your business. Because I also have to be thinking about my family. And we don't have the resources where I can just give it to the employees. It all worked out. I think people hear employee ownership and think that it's an altruistic kind of gift. And it can be, certainly, if you have the resources to do that. But most of the time, it is a planned transition. And the employees come on board, you put together business plans, you look at cash flow, and you put together an offer to the employees based on cash flow projections. And then you transition and it becomes employee owned. And the business generally then will pay back either the selling owner or the bank that helps finance the transaction. So it takes a few years. In our case, it'll be 5 years for the whole financial piece to be done. But on day one, like January 1st of this year, we were actually officially owned by the employees, and it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of good feelings about going to work at a place where you know that you have a financial stake in it. And the trust was a neat way for people to have that stake without feeling like they had to put their home at risk, right? Or, sign a loan or things like that with their personal assets. It's a wonderful way, I should say, option for people to think about exiting their business.
Hey, listeners, if unpredictable revenue is keeping you up at night, this is for you. Most e-commerce brands don't have an advertising problem. They have a predictability problem. Pat from Intergrowth here. We help brands to build a profitable meta ad system for their business within 90 days. If you're interested in learning more, go to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. That's amazing. And I'm glad that you shared the the like altruistic perspective that I think a lot of listeners have. For context, I had never heard of an employee-owned trust until I met you for the first time. So for me, I had the same assumption that it's 100% altruistic. If I'm understanding correctly, though, it sounds like you can structure it in a manner where you look at financials and maybe you say, hey, based on projected cash flow, the existing owners or the past owners are going to get X% of projected cash flow for the next X years. And that ends up becoming ultimately the buyout that maybe isn't quite as generous as you might be able to get going to a private party, but still leaves you with a really healthy financial compensation for everything you've done to build up this business.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about your exit plan, of course, getting acquired or going through a is going to get you your biggest multiple of value of your company. And those deals happen and you have to plan for them and they take a long time. Then the next level is you might go to a business broker on Main Street and sell your business that way. Or you could go the route of employee ownership. I'd say the value that you get in both of those routes, Main Street or employee ownership, are relatively the same. They're probably a little lower for employee ownership because employees, of course, are not valuing the brand or maybe even some of the capital you have in the business. They are strictly looking at cash flow versus a Main Street buyer is going to be looking at the whole enchilada and everything you've built. You will get a lower, probably slightly lower compensation going that route, but it can be structured in lots of different ways to make it whatever that selling owner needs in order to exit. There are some people I know that only exit 50% to the trust and then over 5 years and then spend another 5 years doing they do another transaction to go 100% owned. And so there's flexibility to do things that way. Every business sale, I think, is a unique conglomeration of the seller needs, the buyer needs, and then, of course, the people who are helping you through the transaction, because there's brokers or there's lawyers or there's accountants and it's a thing, right? And it's expensive to sell your business, right? Because all of those people who help you are helping you for a different pay rate than you've probably enjoyed as a business owner.
Hey, listeners, Pat from Intergrowth here. Field of Dreams was an exceptional movie, but man, did those guys get it wrong. If you build it, they will not come. We've been helping e-commerce brands since 2016 to acquire new customers more profitably. So after that website that you built goes live and when no one's coming in the door, we help you to get to the next stage. Interested in learning a little more? Go to intergrowth.com/CGS to schedule a complimentary consultation call with me and get to learn all about how we help businesses to level up. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. I was going to say, yeah, paying all those lawyers, I know can rack up a pretty serious bill over time. As much as you're comfortable sharing, can you talk a little about almost like what the financial side of going through the merger or going the employee-owned trust route looks like? Let's say just looking at advisors that you brought in, legal experts, you name it. And obviously that number will vary depending on revenue numbers, but anything you feel comfortable sharing, I know would be a big help to listeners.
Yeah. So again, when you think about selling through a broker, through Main Street, you're going to pay a broker anywhere from 6% to 12% of your business value goes right back to them for facilitating the sale. That doesn't happen in employee ownership. So that's a plus for it. However, when thinking about it, you're going to have, in our case, we were working with these consultants called Project Equity so that they have a fee. You also have lawyers who are designing the trust. So you have those fees. And you have the lawyers who are getting the transaction done. So you have those fees. And it's a little complex because your company needs to be financed. If you're not 100% owner financing it, then you need to bring banks into the picture. And with footwear, it's a very cyclical business. We also needed a line of credit because our business is very cyclical. So how do you get a line of credit or how do you get a loan for a business where there's no one person? It's a trust, right? It's not Pat who we could say, okay, you've got a good credit rating and you've got a house and we've got these things we can look at, right? It's a trust. So I think the cost outlay, whether you go employee owned or you go through a broker and the broker takes his fee, is similar. So I'll just say that up front. It's going to be anywhere between, let's just say it'll be 10 to 15% of the value of your company. It's going to be in these costs to help transition the company. The way financially that I was helped through this process with our consultants is they did a traditional financial analysis. So look at your books for the last 10 years. Right? They'll look at your EBITDA over those years. They'll build out models and projections for the next 5 years, a base case or a best case or a worst case. And what will your cash flow be each year? From that perspective, it's a pretty easy way to determine the value of your company because they're just saying the company can only pay what it can pay. Here's what we think it's going to be. That's going to be what we're going to present to the employees and take it or leave it. I think that's humbling for every business owner when they first start, right? Down the path of selling their business is you might think it's worth X and someone else thinks it's Y. Fortunately, in my case, like I said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. So I really had a good sense of what Softstar was worth financially and a range. And while it was at the low end of my range, because it was cash flow only, it was still, I knew it was a viable offer. I also had things going on personally in my life at the time where I needed to kind of step back more. And I've been doing it for 20 years, right? And so all of these things were coming together at the same time that for me financially, it made sense. Now, how do you get it financed? You can, if you have a long exit trail and you don't mind, you can just 100% finance everything yourself. You can keep your line of credit in your own name and just over time hope they build up enough to have their own line, their own internal line. I didn't feel comfortable with that. That felt a little too risky for me, and I don't have vast financial resources to do that. So another way you can structure it is to have a bank take out a loan and buy out the owner. Generally, in employee ownership, they are going to buy out anywhere from 25 to 75% of the value. They're not going to do 100%. So generally with employee ownership, the owners are carrying some of that debt and some of that risk. They also generally will want you to stay on for a couple of years and to help the new company, which is a pretty common request in a lot of business sales. And I'm definitely there for my team. So I'll be there contractually for the next 2 years. And if we're all still having fun, maybe I'll stay on longer, but who knows? We'll see. So in my case, the deal was structured that 50% of the value of the company was paid out to my husband and I. The company takes on a loan for that. And those loans, in our case, are backed by purpose-driven banks. That's their mission. They want to build employee ownership. I didn't realize there were banks like that out there or financial groups like that, but there are a lot of financial institutions and investors who are really value driven, who want, maybe they're just investing in things that are sustainable or environmental. In our case, they were investing in employee ownership and they're very passionate about it. They're passionate about it as a way of building wealth for the employees. They're passionate about it as a way of being a very sustainable long-term business, because there's a lot of information out there about how employee-owned businesses historically perform better over time than non-employee-owned businesses. So the bank financed half, I financed half, and then the line of credit actually came from another mission-driven bank, which they were amazing. They're called, and they're out of the East Coast, and they were like, "You guys are a great company. We see your track record for the last 40 years. We'd be happy to give you a line of credit." It was just amazing because, like, all your years as a business owner, working with banks, it's like, eke this, eke that, eke this to get this. And suddenly when you're, working with these purpose-driven banks, they're very, very supportive. I mean, of course, they do a lot of due diligence and they're making sure they're making a safe investment in you. But it was very different than in my experience, working with a traditional bank. So all of that means that there are legal documents about who gets what if anything goes south. And so sales-wise, it became, I thought, a rather complicated transaction. Again, the consultants we were working with had really great people and relationships, and you get through it. And when it was all said and done, my accountant was like, "Whew," he said, "I've witnessed a lot of business sales in my life." And he's like, some are more complex, some are easy. He goes, "But at the end of it, I have never seen everyone kind of walk away happy. And that's what happened in our case, because we all were kind of on the same mission, which was to leave intact Softstar, which is this great company, and to set it up for success for who knows how long, hopefully it's into perpetuity. But I don't know about you, Pat, but I'm not going to be around in another 50 years. So, I hope Softstar's there for, the next couple generations, but we won't be around to see it. So,
Man, I love hearing all this. And one of the things that just jumping back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, I love looking at the acquisition from the angle of there's more to this acquisition than just the financial side. There's almost what I'd call like the legacy side of it. And I've definitely seen, we've worked with a lot of brands that have been acquired over the years, and some of them have been really great acquisitions where things have gone smoothly and the brand has lived on just under new ownership. We've definitely seen cases though where it doesn't work out very well, and the acquiring entity does things to change the product or does things to alter the existing team that's there. And I can imagine for a lot of those founders who built up the businesses, like you said, it's probably not easy to see that. And it sounds like unfortunately your dad experienced something very similar to that. So I think it's great for listeners to give that some thought and say, not just what's the financial payout that I'm looking for, but what is that legacy payout that I have front of mind?
in footwear, that's a huge thing, right? Because there's a reason shoes aren't made in the US, and the labor is the biggest part of your cogs in your shoe. And why would you pay American labor and American dollars? And then you watch people making the makers who make these things. And it's a great job. It's why I love Softstar in the first place, because you are making things, you're manufacturing things, and they're very satisfying jobs, right? You get to not only make a high quality product, you get to see how your customers interact with it and enjoy it and benefit from it. I knew that if I sold Softstar to any savvy business person, that the next logical step to grow the company would be to outsource everything overseas. And that's the reality of footwear. So for me, I think it was a little more black and white. Like I, I knew if someone was trying to grow the business, that would be the next step. But I also knew there was a viable route to keep things here in the US. Yes, maybe we're never going to have one of these knock it out of the park, super high revenue grossing businesses, but we could still have a very solid, healthy way to support ourselves and to serve our customers. And that's really part of this legacy that you're talking about, Pat. That it's been there for 40 years and it means things to people, and it is nice.
Absolutely.
I suppose if I was totally focused on money, I would say it's a luxury to think that way, but there's more to life than money.
Definitely. So, last big question I want to ask you. Let's say there are a couple listeners who are getting ready to exit their business. They're listening to this and they're saying, all right, Tricia, you've sold me. Employee owned trust, that's the way I want to go. What's some of the core pieces of advice you'd like to give those listeners before they start this process?
That's a really good question.
It's like the broadest question I can throw your way, but take it in whatever angle you find most helpful.
I find this interesting because when I follow different entrepreneurs, there are business people who have had and sold and exited multiple times. And I think they would give you a very different answer than someone like me who had one business for 20 years. Yeah. So I'll just preface it with that. What I would say is I think there's a lot of routes to employee ownership, and I think it can be confusing. So if you were interested in employee ownership, I would reach out to one of many organizations out there that are in support of it. Because whether or not you're going to go the co-op route or the trust route or the ESOP route, you probably would need some help with that to figure out what would be the best. And you probably need to try it on and sit with it for 6 months or so. I guess my piece of advice would be that if you're going this route, it's not fast. It's a process. It's going to take about 1.5 years, and you want to make sure you are working with a group of consultants that you really like and trust to help you through. Maybe it's not a group of consultants, it's an organization. Like I noticed just the other day, I saw a company that's sponsored by the state that helps with these transitions, or maybe it's your If you're a manufacturing company, maybe it's your state's manufacturing board. But there are resources in the business community to help you figure this out and step you through it. Yeah, I guess that would be the advice I'd have is get help and realize it's a process, and it's both a financial and emotional and structural process. Selling your business, so in my case, I'm staying on, but it still required a lot of structural changes. I've spent 2 years promoting people and, into more responsibility and building the org chart differently. So it was structured to run without me, because ultimately, for a lot of small businesses, I think that's probably the biggest hurdle is how do you how do you have the processes in place and the people and the organizations that it can thrive without you? And then when you're at that state, then you're ready.
Tricia, I love this. For listeners that either one, want to connect with you, or two, are just interested in checking out Softstar Shoes, one, where can they find you online? Two, where can they find Softstar Shoes online?
Yeah, sure. Well, I welcome anyone if they want to reach out to me personally at Softstar. I'd be happy to connect with them. But Softstar is easy to find. It's just softstar.com, and that's Softstar. Also, if they're interested more in employee ownership, I would recommend the company that we worked with. Their name is Project Equity, and they have a website that talks a lot about employee ownership. I'm sure there's other consultants out there that do similar work, but I was really impressed with them, and I know that they work nationwide. They have a portfolio of companies that they're working with, so it's not just an Oregon thing.
Amazing. And listeners, check out the show notes. We'll share links to all these different sites. But once again, listeners, this is Tricia Salcido, the CFO over at Softstar Shoes. Tricia, this was amazing. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Pat, for giving me a voice to this big change that we went through. And I hope it's helpful to anyone thinking about down the road when they want to exit.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.